Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video today, I'm going to be talking about a few ways that you can retouch your images quicker. And I really love adding some of these methods together that I'm going to talk about today to really help my process of retouching and the whole thing become a lot more seamless and the workflow to become a lot more seamless as well. And I really think some of these tips will be important for any of you who are beginners, or maybe you're looking at doing high workload photography. So that could be event photography, it could be wedding photography. E-commerce is another genre that I would probably fit into the categories that this would really fit into today. But to be honest, any of these tips can be applied to any genre of photography. And if you want to make your workflow a little bit quicker these days, these tips will hopefully help you with that. We're really going to cover some of these aspects today of how you can make it a lot quicker for yourself. So we're actually going to jump straight into the video now, guys, and I hope you really enjoy this video. For my first tip today, this is really about creating actions and presets and really utilizing a batch editing function. So whether that is through Lightroom, whether you prefer to just apply them through Photoshop, that is completely up to you. But applying presets and actions really do have their place in making your workflow a lot quicker. Generally, I would suggest using Lightroom or Capture One more so if you're looking for a quicker workflow overall, and maybe not even heading into Photoshop if you can avoid it, because that's probably going to quicken up your image editing without having to bring your images into Photoshop every time. But obviously for some of us, we really need to utilize Photoshop too. So this does apply to both. Using actions and presets is going to really cut down your time when editing. Now, these presets and actions might be for lots of different things. They may be for different types of color grading, any colors that you really want to apply quickly to your images or to a set of images. You may prefer to create actions for dodge and burn or frequency separation, so skin retouching, anything like that. It can even be things like in relation to e-commerce photography, for example, where you're having to do and edit a lot of images in a single batch, and you really want to make the process quicker. You might have to clean up flaws, you might have to cut out images, anything where you can kind of compile a set of commands into an action or preset to really cut down the time on your editing process is definitely going to make things easier. I always really liked using actions and presets, but creating my own and creating the actual workflow ones is something that took me a really long time to do, and I kind of wish I'd done it earlier. I think it's something that I definitely use these days, especially when I'm retouching for e-commerce, and especially when I'm doing any really intense beauty imagery retouching. I like to make that process as simple as possible, and this is one of the ways that you can do it. Okay, so number two actually relates more to wedding photography. It relates more to portraiture and even beauty photography, but it is to really use a less intensive method for skin retouching. So obviously, as a lot of us know, really intensive skin retouching can take a lot of time. I prefer to stay away from really in-depth skin retouching these days, and I tend to go for a more natural approach with my work, but I know that that's not everyone's approach to skin retouching. So if you're really looking to cut down time with this, it's important to choose an option for skin retouching that is not going to take you all day. Unfortunately, as much as I love dodge and burn, I would highly recommend against using this if you're looking at cutting down time when retouching. Dodge and burn tends to be a little bit more of an intensive option and time-consuming option. Frequency separation is definitely going to make things a bit quicker for the most part. Or you could really just take some simple techniques and using the healing tools on a blank layer. For certain things like wedding photography or even e-commerce photography, that kind of thing, that is where you are going to be probably using minimal skin retouching. And for the most part, I think a lot of wedding photographers, portraiture photographers tend to keep things quite natural. So you can really rely on those other tools that will be a little bit quicker for that. Usually you won't be zooming into the skin so far to see every little pore like beauty photography. So you can kind of rely on those tools in Photoshop a little bit more. Number three is to use a graphics tablet or to integrate a loop deck or something similar into your retouching routine. So I find that either of these options are really good to add in. You can have one or the other or both. And I feel that, especially when I'm using Lightroom or Capture One primarily, Loop Deck is great for that. And doing a lot of batch imagery, that's really helpful for rating things quickly. It's really helpful for skimming through a lot of my workflow and a lot of my imports. And I really enjoy using that for that side of things. Loop Deck really works for that. Now, using a graphics tablet is a whole other matter. So this is your actual retouching process, usually in Photoshop. You can use it anytime though. There's no real rules with it, but I do recommend it for any skin retouching in Photoshop or anything really to do with the retouching process, because you'll just find that using your graphics tablet will cut down time. You'll also find that there's usually a lot more accuracy when using a graphics pen as opposed to using a mouse or a trackpad for that matter. Number 4 is to use shortcut commands. Now, this is a really important tip, and I would say it's probably the most important tip. If you really want to cut time down on your workload and on your retouching process, this is something that you really need to implement. And it's one of those things, again, that I didn't really master until I was much further along in my career. It's not something I paid much attention to when I was a lot younger and learning, and I really wish I had have, because I think of all those times that I was using a mouse to literally click everywhere on the screen in Photoshop or Lightroom, and I could have just been pressing a single key. I could have just been making things a lot more simpler and easier for myself. And especially when you're doing batch workload, when you're doing e-commerce photography and retouching that, or you're retouching weddings, to have those shortcut commands handy, even when you're not doing those kinds of genres, it's so incredibly helpful to learn them. And it's one of those things that at first you might find it a bit clunky to use or to learn, but after a few rounds of editing and a few sessions of editing, you'll find that it starts to become second nature, and you just know where your fingers are meant to be on the keyboard, at which point in the retouching process, and it really does help. And this last tip today is more for the perfectionists out there, and like myself, in the past, I was more of a perfectionist, I would say. Now I've kind of learnt to let things go and not feel like I have to edit every little detail of an image. And this is something that I've really had to train myself to do, because it's something that is very common, I think, with creatives in general, is kind of having that perfection element, or wanting to have that perfection element. So one thing that I really would recommend is to not zoom into your images too far. This is more related to things like skin retouching and really going into every little pore and doing things like that. And I've often recommended not doing this for the retouching process in general, because I find that a few mistakes can really pop up when you tend to do this, and you'll tend to over edit things a little too much. So there's actually some negatives that do come out of this anyway. But if you're not zooming in too far, then you're really not going to take notice of every little spot on a person's face. And really, at the end of the day, most clients will probably not want you to remove every little spot anyway. So I think for the most part, it's just easier to not zoom in on every photo too close. Obviously, there will be times where you need to zoom into a photo, and that's completely fine. And the level of retouching that you're doing is going to depend on the client you have. But for several reasons, don't do it too much, and don't sort of stay in a prolonged time zoomed into images like that, because you'll find yourself spending like 20 minutes on one singular image, even if it's like an e-commerce image or a wedding image. And depending on the image, you'll probably be like, I've spent way too much time on this and I need to move on. So that's actually one important tip that I would also add. Okay guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this list of 5 things to help make your retouching process quicker. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and what you like to do to cut down your time with retouching, because there's a lot of people out there that really need tips on this, and even myself included, I'm always trying to find ways to cut down my retouching process if I can. So definitely comment down below and let me know what you'd like to see next on my channel. If you're interested in any of my retouching courses, the links for those are in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video again, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.